I'm Elisabeth Hendrickson, and today I'm here with my good friend Usha Ramachandran. Usha, you and I worked together at Pivotal, and we worked together on PKS, the Pivotal Kubernetes service, where you were the head of product for PKS. And you and I had lunch recently, and we were talking about everything that you'd learned about product management and applying that to internal platforms. And I thought that would be a fantastic thing for us to talk about in a recording. So here we are. What did you end up doing after you left Pivotal?
So one of the things I did, I've lived in the Bay Area for many years. I actually moved to Tokyo for what was supposed to be a 1 year stint, but turned out to be a 5 year, almost 5 years in Tokyo. But it turned out to be a great experience that gave me a bunch of opportunities. And one of those opportunities was to lead product management for an internal platform team at a company called Woven by Toyota. So we built a global developer platform that was enabling vehicle developers to be able to collaborate and ship software while protecting intellectual property.
So, like I said, you have a lot of experience building internal platforms. And for that matter, PKS is a platform. So, even though it's an enterprise product, it also, I think, gave you experience with shipping a platform that is very applicable to an internal platform. And one of the things that you and I were talking about is that, at least with enterprise platforms, your buyer and your user are two different people. Do you find that that is also true with internal platforms or less so?
Absolutely. And you're right that PKS is also in some ways a platform. I think the big difference is who you're selling the product to and whether you're making any actual like revenue from it. You know, that there's an actual like um, P&L that you're managing with the money coming in and investments into the product. For an internal platform, there's still a difference between, say, a user and a buyer in the sense that the user is typically going to be the team members of the various teams that are using your platform. And potentially the buyer is your leadership as well as the leadership of the different lines of businesses within that company, or if it's like a consortium of companies, and this whole consortium of different companies. So I think there's slightly different, and their motivations might be slightly different, but it's still there's still the case that the outcomes that the users are trying to achieve may be slightly different from the higher level outcomes that the leaders of those teams are trying to achieve.
Yeah, one of the things that we would do with enterprise products, of course, is talk to all of our constituents. We did a fair amount of research, and that's something that I don't see a lot of internal platform teams doing a whole lot of. I don't even know if some of them realize the extent to which they really have to be doing user research, but that's something that you've talked about the need for. Can you say a little bit more about how you go about doing road mapping or user research or the typical things that a product manager would do in the context of an internal platform?
Yeah, I think the fundamentals of product management, like being really customer focused, really understanding what the user's needs are, both the buyer as well as the decision maker, and like publishing, firstly creating a roadmap and then publishing it so that everyone understands what you're doing, are like super important even for an internal platform team. It looks a little different though because your users are all internal users and you're really bombarded with a lot of different requests. And not all of these are long term, hey, build me this fantastic feature. A lot of them are more tactical. And so it's kind of interesting how you do user research in such a in such an environment because your users are giving you a lot of feedback, but it may not always be very high fidelity or give you a lot of insights. And so conducting user surveys or having even just monitoring Slack and monitoring your internal support tickets are great ways to do some user research for your internal platform teams. One of the benefits of having an internal platform team, internal customer, is that they're way more accessible to you. So you could just ask one of your team members who's consuming the platform to, for a coffee or a lunch or something, you can learn things a lot faster than if you had like an external customer and you have to work through sales teams or get on a schedule to actually meet and talk with them to do user research. So I think it really, the fundamentals of user research, prioritization, road mapping, all of those good things still apply and maybe, provide um, a sort of until now unrealized and unmet, need for internal platforms.
Yeah, I mean, I know that there are some people out there who are doing this, but I'm remembering one particular organization that I saw where um, they were trying to tally up how many of the things that they were responsible for. Sorry, they being engineering. And as a whole, an internal platform was part of the engineering organization, but they were trying to tally up how many of these things are running on our internal platform that we're building out, as opposed to still running on like bare EC2 instances or whatever. Although the internal platform team was saying all the right things, like all of the right things, they had absolutely the right vision at the very large abstract level in terms of uh, all of the DevOps principles and practices and a platform that was resilient and supported microservice architecture, et cetera. So they're saying all the right things. But then when you looked at the metrics, not that much had moved over. And when you dug in even further, the stuff that made the company money was still all running on VMs, not on the platform. And so part of what I'm hearing you say is really about that kind of that product management prioritization for business value. And I was wondering, I don't know if you want to give some examples or talk about how you go about making sure if you're responsible for an internal platform team to make sure that it actually is providing the value that your decision makers who are funding the project are looking for.
Yeah, I think a very important part of building any product is actually just the metrics that you're using to measure success. And so as I, would go about trying to just form a roadmap or prioritize what things to work on. Um, Whatever things get prioritized, there should be some either leading or lagging metric, or usually both of them, that would be tracked to actually ensure that there are, that there are actual benefits being provided to the user. So, for example, if you're trying to build like golden paths for developers, and what is the actual time that a developer would save by using the golden path, or like how much more secure, in terms of um, uh, just in terms of the basic security that's built into the golden path would your applications have. So like a security scorecard. So these are like a little bit more easier to measure. But like if you're thinking about adoption, how are we getting people to actually use these golden templates? That's a little bit harder. And then that comes to like marketing your work to your internal users. It comes to getting buy-in from the decision makers. So like really getting buy-in like all the way up to like the CTO or CEO of your company, that this is the way in which we're moving, or this is the path for our team, and then ultimately showing value to the users. I think that's the thing that I've seen actually works, where the a lot of the usage of the platform basically increased as people started getting actual value out of it. And those are things also you can track through things like NPS and things like that. So it comes down to metrics and making sure that the value that your platform is providing is well understood by the users, as well as their broader teams, as well as the leadership of the company.
You said a magic word, marketing. And backing up a little bit, I have now seen multiple internal platform teams that were counting on a top down mandate. So they were counting on somebody with a C in front of their title requiring internal developers to use their platform. And they weren't thinking about making it appealing. And when I think about marketing and going through that the whole awareness, interest, desire, action kind of funnel for a product that somebody buys. I'm wondering, how do you think about that with respect to an internal platform? And is it different from what you think about when you're thinking about it through that enterprise software lens?
Yeah, I think so. Firstly, I do think that for internal platforms, a lot of times having that top-down mandate is almost essential because there's a lot of just inertia in, changing your processes, right? Because to some people, it may seem like we're just going around and landing at the same place. Like, why would we spend all this time migrating? But really, the benefit of doing that is the long-term velocity and the long-term security that you get for your platform. Um, so I think those are the types of incentives that you would market to your users. And so it's when I think of marketing towards internal users, it's really different from like an external, like a launch plan and things like that, right? Because most likely for an external product, you have a marketing team and a go-to-market, a motion that'll make sure that your product is advertised and seen by your customers. And you obviously don't have that kind of support when you're an internal team. And so it really comes down to doing things that are a little more like um, direct in terms of marketing. So doing like newsletters for your users, doing office hours, trying to provide like quarterly or even monthly updates on your roadmap. So making it really easy for people to see, where is the platform now? Where is it going? Like, what am I going to get in the next, so many months? And then also providing users a way to um, give feedback on the top of mind things for them and then showing that, hey, I'm implementing things that users have asked for. And so it's kind of like this feedback loop almost, so not like really just flashy marketing. Although I always wished when I was leading this platform team that we could do these like cool videos and stuff with even with customers, right? Like coming and telling us, hey, this was our workflow and this is how the platform helped us solve it. But yeah, I think we, maybe in the future, I didn't actually get to that this time around.
The technology for doing interviews just keeps getting better and better. And so maybe this is in your future.
Yeah.
Um, I'm like a little bit stuck on just helping people see the value. And I'm wondering, maybe I could take the question a different direction, which is when you think about the best possible outcome for an internal platform initiative, what does good look like? How do you know that the platform is providing that tremendous value to the organization?
I think really, so when you think of like traditional IT kind of teams, they're really more of a cost center, right? Where people are not really tracking the ROI of the platform or, what value it's actually providing. So I think maybe a good way to know what success looks like is firstly to start measuring it, and to have some clear kind of goals and clear ROI metrics for a platform. So for example, some of the things you could do, and this may seem a little forced, but I think there is still value in doing this, which is just try and assign some sort of a like almost like a dollar value to the time saved by doing something, or the value to the organization by not having to respond to security incidents in like an ad hoc way and having like a tried and tested way of building and shipping things, as well as maybe the observability pieces as well, right? So there's a bunch of value that a platform provides, which is as a whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And so trying to actually put just a monetary value on it, and then seeing as the number of users scale on the platform, then you actually get like an ROI number from the platform. So, and the thing about this is it's a little tricky to do because I think different stakeholders and especially like very opinionated engineering teams who might want to take the platform in a different direction may argue that, hey, this is not actually providing me with this value. But that's another like kind of fascinating piece about being a platform PM, which is to get buy-in from a lot of different stakeholders who are actually very, very kind of close to you. They're right there. Like your team is right there. So I think really like taking a platform from being just a bunch of tools and processes that you're chipping away at and getting through to actually focusing on what is the value that we're providing to the user. How are we going to accelerate the shipping and responding to various different business incidents that might happen is really going to get you to value and also prove the value, because chances are if you're trying to get to a place where you're making the business more efficient, you're going to focus on the features or the capabilities that are going to drive that. um, so yes, I would say, you know, focus on what that value is you're trying to deliver, and then actually measure it, and then adjust your platform so that you're continuously delivering value. So really fundamental, just fundamental product management.
You're reminding me though, you and I both worked on Cloud Foundry, but we didn't work together on Cloud Foundry. And then we both worked on PKS and we did work together. And one of the philosophies that we had at Pivotal for our platforms was kind of thinking about things in the vertical and horizontal. So from a vertical perspective, or at least this is the way I visualized it, there's the workflow of actually getting an application deployed to the platform. But then the horizontal was all of the stuff that you just named: the security, the observability, et cetera. And there was just this whole laundry list that these platforms gave you. And as you think about whether an internal platform is based on Kubernetes or a PaaS or it's something that's homegrown, but as you think about the horizontal, I wonder if you could kind of elaborate a little bit more, because this is where the economics of scale come in. Because if you were going to build observability for each thing that's running in a VM, it might be built a little bit differently. You're not getting the economics of scale. So security, observability, what else can a really good platform give you that would be potentially cost prohibitive to build one by one if you were deploying to VMs?
So I think firstly, just talking about the scale of it, right? Like, so let's say you had 10 teams that all had to do this particular thing for their application. Already, I think most infrastructure teams do streamline a lot of the processes, but there's a lot of like snowflakes that will do things differently, right? So there's a lot of like just overhead and toil in terms of, managing things in a bespoke way for many different teams. And in some cases, teams might be like, oh, we're really special. We're just going to build our own observability thing. And then somewhere down the line, the person who built it will leave or go on to do other things. And then they're like, we have no one to maintain this. So your infrastructure team, can you take this over? And they're like, no, you should have used the standardized thing, right? So I think that's basically the value that having kind of not really opinionated, but standardized with guardrails. And options for experimenting a little bit within those guardrails. So I think that's kind of the value that a platform would actually provide to an organization. Taking that further to more like self-service, where I have like Cloud Foundry was such an amazing platform, right? I just had someone tell me that I want Cloud Foundry. And I was like, okay, been there. I wish, right? But the thing is that having the ability to say, like, here is my application. These are all the things that I want to do, and they're usually pretty standard. Like, you need some way to get access to your application, so like you need some form of routing. You need like some like authentication mechanism. You might need a database. Maybe you need like a message queue. So there are fundamental building blocks that a platform could put together and present as sort of a catalog item for your developers. And so I think that's really the value and the real savings that comes, right? Because then you don't have to think, okay, I need to spin up a new like application. How do I do all these things? And is my team gonna have to sit and figure out like AWS, like how do I deploy all of this, whatever your cloud is, right? Like that you're using. So I think that's where really the cost savings or the time savings, and also just the mental bandwidth savings comes in because there's a team that's thought about this and they've hopefully done their research, talked to a lot of different users, and come up with some useful patterns that the whole organization can follow.
You're reminding me of how much was in that platform. And it does occur to me, I'm now remembering a situation where working on a thing that didn't have all of those things, and there was so much pressure to get it all and get it all now. Like it wasn't pressure to get the next thing. It was, well, it's a platform. It should have big long list. And I know that one of the things you and I talked about at lunch was finding a way to focus and prioritize. If you have somebody who's super psyched about, great, we're going to have an internal platform, and that means that I'm going to get all of those building blocks that you just listed, plus all of those great horizontal attributes that a platform can give you: security, observability, etc. um, how do you think about prioritizing and figuring out and sequencing, figuring out what the next thing is, instead of suddenly being in the situation of getting yanked back and forth by people who want this thing and want it now?
In terms of prioritizing or sequencing of things, firstly, I think there's the mandate or the scope for an internal platform team can be really large. So one thing I would do is like focus on like what are the big problems that the organization or the company is trying to solve. And then as you get a lot of like ad hoc requests or you do more intentional user research, trying to focus on finding the biggest problems that you want to tackle. And I think once those problems are identified, it's important to have like a roadmap of like some number of quarters that gives you a chance to actually address those issues instead of thrashing. I think that's particularly challenging now, especially with a lot of like new tools as well as AI coming into the picture, and just, a lot of new capabilities that can be unlocked by having like a chat interface, or like by having like AI coding assistant, or, many other things that, that are yet even unknown, right? So how do you create a roadmap and stay true to it while still being kind of nimble and agile. So if like something new and cool really comes up that you need to implement, that you do it. So it's I would say, having a kind of a North Star and a vision of what you want the platform to do is really important, and then prioritize according to that. Um, and if there are disruptive technologies that do come up along the way, then kind of evaluating them and their use towards the North Star that you're trying to approach, and then incorporating that into your roadmap. So not like jumping on every new flashy thing piece of technology that comes up, even though I think your users might demand that. So I remember when like Gen AI was just kind of the buzz like a couple of years ago. It was like we really had to kind of move fast to get those capabilities out there so that people would not use just the generic, you know, out there internet version of ChatGPT.
Yeah, and it's kind of hard to know though which things are squirrel and which things are actually really important and emergent things that could make a huge difference strategically to the organization. So, do you have any advice for somebody who is facing that cacophony of conflicting demands, and some of them are the new shiny things, and maybe there are even engineers on the platform team who are super psyched to go chase the new shiny things, but you have to figure out somehow how to keep things focused? What heuristics do you use to evaluate all of the new ideas that are coming in?
Yeah, I think that's it. That's actually it's a maybe a timely question because I'm grappling with this challenge right now. I just started a new role on kind of a newish platform team. And I think the advice that I would give myself, or that I tell myself when I'm getting distracted with a lot of things, is to choose my focus areas carefully, and that that there are certain like words or patterns that I'm seeing often, as well as trying to um, talk to a lot of different users and gain context on what's top of mind for them, and do some like real problem exploration, user research to see, what are the big rocks that we want to move, and craft like a vision and a roadmap around that. Right? So don't try and solve everything at once, but try to solve the most important problem based on your research. Of course, you may pick the wrong problem to solve, but that's okay, right? As long as you're measuring success and you're tracking where you're going. So that's the second part of it, which is to have very clear success metrics, and also kind of evaluating where you are against those metrics so that you can decide whether you want to pivot to do something else, or whether you should keep going, or whether you should add additional things. Like you're doing great, so you know, are there more capabilities, and we should expand the scope of our platform vision. So yeah, so I think those are the two things I would, it all comes back to the first part, which is listen to your users, and then focus on the things that you're hearing as the most like painful things, and measure your success.
I guess the last thing that I heard in what you said was experiment, because if you're listening to your users and you're measuring stuff and that stuff correlates to what success looks like for your users, then you can experiment with the hypothesis of, if we do this, it's going to get us closer to the goal. And then if it doesn't, then you can pivot. That's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing listen, measure, experiment.
Yes, not I didn't make up anything new.
Well, but here's the thing that I think is so important. It doesn't have to be new to have value and be something that I'm not sure that many internal platform teams are great at, because a lot of times they're run by somebody who came from an engineering background. And let's be honest, I come from an engineering background. I have absolutely 100% fallen into the trap of saying, well, I know what the right thing is. Whether it's way back in the day, if I was building up a library of test automation primitives, I would be designing that. Back in the day, I designed that through that lens of, I know what the right thing is. I should have been designing it through the lens of, who are my users and what do they think their biggest problems are, and how do I make sure that whatever I'm building is meeting their needs, and we have a way to measure the impact that what I'm doing has, and therefore a way to experiment. I was not doing that. And I think that there are a lot of internal platform teams today that are falling into that same engineering driven trap that I fell into way back in the day when I was building test automation libraries. And so that's why I think that this is such an important topic. And it kills me when you say, but I'm not saying anything new. For this, for at least some of the audience, I think maybe you are. Even if it's new, it's not new through that perspective of another discipline. Bringing that discipline into platform engineering is so important. So with that, um, how about we land the plane on this conversation? Let's say that you got the opportunity to talk to a group of people who are all from an engineering background, and they're looking at their internal platforms that they are responsible for, and they're kind of going, oh, what advice would you have for that group of people to get started with bringing the product management mindset to their work?
Well, I would tell them to hire a PM.
Well, hang on a sec, because I have also seen circumstances where that didn't go so great either. And there is something special about your background. You were an engineer and then you moved into product management. So you do have both perspectives. I do believe that leading an internal platform initiative really does, it's an act of engineering leadership, because that platform is going to be the manifestation of a philosophy around how we build software. So not just any PM, right?
I was just kidding. I actually, I mean, I do think that having someone on the team who's really focused on understanding the user, on managing or on kind of prioritizing work for the team, and keeping track of where we're going. And the reason I said they should hire a PM is because I think these are typically things done by product managers or maybe the leads on an engineering team. But essentially, whoever this person is, right, who's leading the platform doesn't have to be a product manager. I would basically have them review what their current platform is doing. What are some of the inefficiencies that have crept up over the years into their platform? What are some of the key things that the business is trying to achieve? So reach out to your customers and identify your customer personas basically in some way, and start crafting your whatever the stories or the backlog, the things that you have in your backlog on what you're working on, with the lens of providing value to someone. It might seem more time consuming at first, instead of writing like a one line, hey, I know exactly what this ticket is and I'm just going to do it, versus really trying to identify what value am I providing to the user. And maybe you don't have to do it for everything, but you can do it for like the high level outcome that you're trying to get at.
To reflect back to you, what I'm hearing you say is that somebody who comes from an engineering background, one of the first things that they could do is go figure out the personas for their buyers and users, and then look at everything that they're planning through that lens and get a lot more clear on the outcomes that their technical work is going to drive for
Pretty
those
much.
for those personas. So that's what I got from your answer, and I think that's a really good answer. I think that that is a fantastic first step for somebody who maybe is looking at their world through a little bit more of a technically driven lens. I am so grateful to you for spending time with me today and talking about this. I think it's a really important subject, especially as so many more organizations are creating their internal platforms or have an internal platform that maybe isn't delivering the value that they expected, and they're having to go take that step back and see what they need to be doing differently. I think that applying the kinds of product management mindset approaches that you just discussed are so important.